Of all the things I've seen on the battlefields of the frontier, the pilot is the true dominant force.
Titanfall 2 is the sequel to Titanfall, the multiplayer-only shooter developed by Respawn Entertainment and originally released back in 2014. Set in the future, the game centers around an intergalactic battle between the IMC and the Militia, a war waged by soldiers and pilots and their mecha suits called Titans. It's just been released for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Microsoft Windows, around that time of the year when we really just get bombarded with AAA titles, of which Titanfall 2 is no exception. The first game did its best to tell the story through its multiplayer-only mode, which consisted of a bunch of maps and game modes which pitted players against one another. Also with the inclusion of AI-controlled enemies to thicken out the numbers and make the battles seem more large-scale. This was basically just a way to give the multiplayer mode a bit of depth, but all you were really doing was listening to tidbits of dialogue in between playing the same mode or map for the 50th time as you leveled up. With Titanfall 2, the difference here is that they've actually included a proper single-player campaign, with a more tangible story and characters you can actually become attached to. On top of this, what's also kind of surprising is that this campaign is actually really good. In fact, I'd say it's one of the best single-player FPS campaigns I think I've played all year. No bullshit. The story takes place after the events of the first game, and you're playing as a militia rifleman called Jack Cooper. When you're dropped on the planet Typhon, your commanding officer and squad is killed as you're attacked by the IMC. It all seems hopeless, but before long you're in the cockpit of a Titan called BT-7274, or affectionately known as BT by Jack. From there you just kind of move across the planet for the game's half dozen or so missions as you try to regroup with one of your commanding officers, dispatching the IMC to get in your way and taking out a few key Titan pilots in what serves as mini boss fights.
Lisk has put a high price on your head, pilot. Dead or alive, that makes you worth something to me.
I think the B in BT stands for bro, because throughout the campaign there's this really subtle bond between Jack and BT that begins to form, often allowing you to choose from two different responses during dialogue which can affect BT's reactions. BT has a real dry sense of humour and some of his lines are genuinely pretty funny.
I've got a bad feeling about this.
The time disturbances in the area are a plausible cause of your ailment. Medical routine J12 suggests slow and deep breaths.
Overall, the campaign is this weird sort of hybrid of Mirror's Edge, Crysis, Singularity, and I guess Call of Duty. It's a great combination of combat either on foot or in the Titan, mixed in with some lengthy platforming sections where you're wall running and double jumping over seemingly bottomless pits or cliff tops, some of which are actually challenging and almost all of which you can plummet to your death if you screw up. Anyone who played the first game will know how buttery smooth the controls are, and Titanfall 2 is no exception. You can turn on auto sprint in the options menu, which I would suggest, which pretty much means you can just run around quicker during combat, and also when going down some of the more trickier platforming sections the game throws at you. It's easy to dismiss the game as a Call of Duty clone, but the very skills you're given really open the game up and make it a lot more enjoyable. From being able to cloak for a short period of time and flanking your enemies, through to swapping in and out different weapon and grenade configurations until you find something that works best. And then there's that feeling during those moments when you reunite with BT after a section on foot and jump into the cockpit to totally wreck the shit out of everything attacking you. It's just immensely satisfying. And the mech on mech fights throughout the campaign are fantastic as well. I don't think I'll ever get tired of sliding across the ground and firing my weapon at the same time. It just feels and looks badass. The whole campaign is just really enjoyable, and there's even a mission about halfway through the game that gives you a time traveling device where you got to swap back and forth between past and present to avoid environmental hazards. Overall, the campaign just shows off this amazing sense of creativity that I didn't ever think would be possible. Should go without saying, but Titanfall 2 looks pretty damn gorgeous. Running on the Source engine, though you'd hardly believe it, it just shows off amazing texture work, detailed modelling for weapons and character models, and great atmospheric effects as well. The last couple levels, no spoilers, where you're in these huge battles with a dozen Titans just look incredible. Similarly, the sound and music all get the job done, with all of the weapons feeling and sounding very meaty and impactful. It's just a great game in terms of presentation. The only downside to this campaign is probably to be expected, and that's that the whole thing is short, like 3 to 4 hours short. It is a really tightly crafted experience, but it does seem to run out just when it's getting fun. If they had doubled this campaign, it would have made it a lot better, as once you've finished, there's not really any real reason to replay it, unless you're collecting all the hidden items or want to put another notch on your belt by finishing it on the highest difficulty. Which brings us on to the multiplayer mode, which is all anyone really bought the game for in the first place. Now, I haven't had a horrible experience with the multiplayer mode. I've had practically no lag or dropouts, and aside from the fact that there's only ever a few thousand people online, which is pretty abysmal for a game that's just been launched, getting a match going was usually a quick process. Gameplay is again a combination of playing as a pilot, where you're darting around these large maps and taking on AI enemies as well as other players, or you're inside your Titan, engaging other player-controlled Titans whilst enemy pilots peck away at your armor with anti-Titan weapons. But there's been a few modifications to the formula here which differentiates the game from its predecessor. For starters, Titans are now kind of broken down into classes, each with specific abilities, a lot like the specialists in Black Ops 3 or the operators in Rainbow Six Siege. So it's not a matter of customizing your Titan as you would the pilot, you know what I mean, picking and choosing weapons and skills and perks. Instead, you've kind of got to pick a class and then really stick with it. Now this does kind of suck if it's the first few times you're using a Titan, because you really won't know what the hell you're doing. And I mean, I understand it's been done for balancing, because certain weapons and skill configurations from the first game could be really overpowered, but it does remove a lot of customization element from the game. In terms of the pilots, the ability you choose affects your appearance from things like a grappling hook or a cloak, but aside from that you're still able to choose any weapon you want, with certain guns obviously being unlocked at higher levels. There's not really a better or worse weapon to use. I mean, most guns seem to kill other players from a second or two of concentrated gunfire, and it just comes down to personal preference, though you're not going to be sniping other players with a submachine gun or a pistol, obviously. Leveling up comes from earning merits from matches instead of directly from XP, which may come from a preset amount of kills with a certain weapon or completing some kind of other in-game achievement. Actually forcing you to play smart and contribute to your team, but also encouraging you to change up your loadout to experiment with everything on offer. Gamers are kind of spoilt for choice lately with this, Battlefield, and the upcoming Infinite Warfare in terms of games to choose from, and at least Titanfall 2 is a bit unique in the sense that it's got this mix of both pilot and Titan styles of gameplay. It's just a shame that it's going to be dead in a month or two if the current amount of players online is any indication. Alright Sonny Jim, so what you got here is a game with the expected multiplayer but an unexpected single player. Right now the question is, as it is with all these multiplayer focused games, is are you going to invest time into this component and get whatever it is you define as your money's worth? The campaign is great, it really is, but it's not worth it alone, especially not at full price. If you're going to spend hundreds of hours poning noobs online, then I'd say pick it up and get into it. But if you're just keen to try the campaign and don't really want to spend the money, then maybe wait until it drops a bit in price. Don't worry, BT isn't going anywhere.